Greeting everyone. My name is Maryam Barghamadi and I'm honored to present in this conference. First, I would like to thank the organizers of the 11th International Hybrid Conference on Education, Psychology and Behavioral Science for the opportunity to participate in this esteemed event. The title of this research is Exploring the Relationship between English Proficiency and Influential Factor on Productive Knowledge of Multi-Word Unit to create effective learning materials. This slide shows the author's photo as presented at a conference. These slides provide author's view. First one is me. Recently, I completed my PhD at Flinders University. Dr. Amanda Muller is an associate professor at Flinders University. Dr. James is an associate professor at Meiji University, Japan. Professor Joanne Arciuli is a full professor at Flinders University. All of my co-authors in this research also were my supervisor during my PhD candidate. In this study, collocation or multi-word units is used as an interchangeable term. In a simple way, a multi-word unit refers to the group of the words that come together in expected patterns to create a unit or a word combinations that reflect the natural language. There are several reasons why learning collocation is important. For example, I heard that bad news in this situation, I can say, I'm afraid, but using other patterns such as I'm scared is not acceptable. So in a first step, mastering collocation provide idiomatic production, but failing to use a native-like production can create unacceptable structures. Also, researchers, especially in corpus studies, found that a spoken discourse and a written discourse consist of multi-word units. Therefore, some researchers, such as Pilser Sanchez, emphasize that multi-word unit should be a component of the vocabulary learnings. However, previous studies indicated that L2 learners have a problem with collocation production at an advanced level. Therefore, several studies try to find and focus on influential factors. These studies also focus on influential factors in a learning collocation such as semantic transparency, L1, L2 congruency, frequency, and proficiency to create a new resource for Persian's learner. Definition of the collocations. In the field of the lexicon studies, scholars have used a variety of the terms and criteria to define collocations. This variety may indicate that the definition of the collocation is a challenging task. There are two major approaches to defining collocations in L2 research. The first one is phraseological approach that focuses on semantic transparency of the word combinations. For example, read a book is a free combinations in this view, but read one's mind is a collocations. Another one is frequency-based approach. In this view, collocations defines as any word that co-occur more frequently than one would expect by chance by using a statistical measure. Recently, Dr. James Rogers combined the frequency-based approach with the lemmatized congrammes method to identify useful multi-word units from one of the large corpus COCA. The congramming method identified consistency variation and positional variations. For example, in the lemma pair come and terms, multi-word units such as come to terms, come to the terms of wait, to come to terms of wait, coming to terms, and so on are counted together. Dr. Rogers developed a novel techniques to find exemplary multi-word units from lemmatized congrammes data. These techniques identified as an exemplar of each lemmatized congram. For instance, for the lemma pair common terms, which of these are the most common? His technique took the most frequent core and expanded it if any other multi-word units combined the core and the frequency comprised 50% or more of that of the core. in this situation come to terms with selected as in the most common. Thus, in the current research, collocation or multi-word units are operationally defined as an lemmatized concurrence. Several variables influence L2 collocation acquisition and the processing of the larynx. Concurrency has been extensively investigated, and researchers found that concurrent collocations, which have word-for-word translations equivalent to the learner's first language, impose a lower learning burden than in concurrent ones. For example, in Persians, take a photo or take a shower are concurrent for Persians. An example of an inconcurrent collocation is take medicines, which would literally equivalent to use medicines. Also, frequency also play a role in a faster processing of multi-word units. Some researchers found that L2 learner responds more quickly to high-frequency collocations in a judgment task. Another criterion is semantic transparency. Generally, these items investigated in idiom studies. This criterion might be a factor, especially in phraseological approach. Another factor is proficiency, L2 proficiency. Some researchers found that there is a positive correlation between L2 proficiency and learning collocations. Due to the lack of standardized tests in this area, assessing productive knowledge of multi-word units remain a challenge compared to the single-word assessments method. Corpus-based studies and a gap-filling test are commonly used to measure productive knowledge. However, corpus-based study may not fully control determinant factors, and learners may exhibit avoidance of certain collocations or overuse master's ones. On the other hand, gap-filling tests allow researchers to target specific elements like concurrency. However, they may fail to comprehensively understand collocational knowledge usage in a real-time production context. This current study used low-variations format to assess productive collocation knowledge and investigate influential factors. This test structure is similar to the C test, but uses sentences rather than paragraph. This study is a follow-up study on our previous research that was published in 2023. In a previous study, we conducted a comprehensive analysis of around 11,000 multi-word units from Rogers' list and found that congruency between the learner's first and a target language is a main criterion to select useful multi-word units when the majority of the items were inconcurrent with Persians and most of them were literal or at semantic transparency items. Therefore, this study tried to focus the influential factors and confirms that congruency is a main criterion to select items and develop a useful multi-word units for a Persian's learners. To achieve this, we address the following research question in this study. First, is there a relationship between knowledge of multi-word units and Persian-speaking learners' proficiency as a measure by IELTS scores? Second, to what extent that Persian-speaking learners' productive knowledge change over multi-word units frequency levels? And the last one, to what extent that the frequency level L1, L2 concurrency and semantic transparency of multi-word units predict Persian-speaking learners' proficiency? Method sections. To conduct this research, ethical approval for the research has been obtained from the Flinders University Social and Behavioral Research Ethics Committee. 256 Iranian University students volunteers to participate in the study. The participants were undergraduate and graduate students majoring in English. The average proficiency level of the participants was B2 to C1 based on the Common European Framework of Reference according to their IELTS scores with mean of 6.8. Research instruments. Since Rogers in 2017 utilized data from COCA and identified 11,212 multi-word units in his list, this study rooted in corpus-based studies. As I mentioned that, in our previous study in 2023, we conducted a contrastive analysis on Rogers' list and translated all of the items into the Persians and rated them based on L1, L2 concurrency via utilizing 12-point system. This system assigns points based on the degree of equivalence between the translated word combinations and their translation in Persians. For example, do your homework is word to word equal to the Persians. So the point is 12 out of 12. However, make an impressions is equivalent to put. Therefore, it received 6 out of 12 and it's in concurrence items. And also the list classified based on the Grant and Boer taxonomy to investigate semantic transparency. To manage the items, we divided these classifications into the literal and opaque items. Test design. A gap-filling test was employed to measure the participants' productive knowledge of multi-word units. Rogers' list was sorted based on the frequency. So in the first step, the list was divided into 4 separate frequency bands, F1, F2, F3, and F4. Each band consists of 2,800 multi-word units. Regarding to the semantic transparency, we divided into 2 subcategories, literal and opaque, and concurrency was divided into the rating of 0 to 4, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12 based on the rating point. So one item with the lowest frequency was categorized as a literal and one item as opaque received an L1, L2 rating of 0 to 4 was selected. Since the total number of the literal items in 6 to 12 concurrency rating set was 3 to 4 times higher than in 0 to 4 rating set, 2 literal items and 1 opaque item were chosen from this set. And at the end, we have got 8 items from each frequency band were selected, totaling 32 items, an equal ratio of such items in a test. This table shows the bank of items to choose test questions items based on each frequency bands and considering concurrency rating and semantic transparency classification. The data were analyzed using version 27 of SPSS. All relevant techniques were tested before conducting the analysis. For a statistical analysis, bootstrapping as an resampling techniques was employed to obtain reliable estimates of the standards, errors, and confidence interval. The table summarized the descriptive statistic of participants' scores based on 4 frequency level F1 to F4, concurrent and non-concurrent, literal and opaque items. The table shows that a total score of 8 is possible for each frequency levels. As you can see, the participants' mean score decreased across the frequency levels from F1 to F4. This decline suggested that participants performed better on higher frequency items than lower frequency items. Also, the mean scores of concurrent item and a literal item is higher than non-concurrent item and opaque item. This slide provides a summary of regression analysis for independent variables such as frequency, concurrency, and semantic transparency items with dependent variables, IELTS score, To answer the first research question of this research, is there a relationship between knowledge of multi-word units and proficiency levels as a measure by IELTS score, a Pearson correlations with consideration for bootstrapping was conducted. The result revealed that there was a strong and positive correlation with a large effect size between IELTS score and multi-word units test. As I explained that in previous slide, there is a decline from mean score of F1 to F4. To answer the research questions 2, to what extent that Persian speaking learners' productive collocation and knowledge change over multi-word unit frequency level, repeated measure ANOVA determines whether there were statistically significant differences between the frequency levels of multi-word units in multi-word units test. The results revealed that the amount of multi-word unit knowledge over 4 frequency categories differed significantly. However, participants has a similar knowledge of multi-word units at F2 and F3 frequency level, suggesting that these two levels were not significantly different. A hierarchical multiple regression was run using the 4 frequency levels as an independent variable to determine if multi-word units knowledge affected subsequent IELTS score. The result revealed that each additional frequency levels add to the regressions model explain additional variance in IELTS score. However, F2 was not a significant predictor of IELTS score in this model. This finding suggested that proficiency may be mainly influenced by knowledge of less frequent multi-word units. To follow research questions 3, separate multiple regressions analysis was run to examine the relationship between congruency and semantic transparency. As I explained, that the result revealed that the participants' mean score for concurrence items was higher than non-concurrence items. The congruency models was found to be statistically significant and indicated the independent variables concurrent and non-concurrence item predicted the dependent variables IELTS score. A significant interactions also was found between independent variables and dependent variables. Further examination of the interactions models reveals that a rising trend in a knowledge of non-concurrence multi-word units for IELTS score. This pattern suggests that the participant proficiency in non-concurrence multi-word units may significantly impact their overall IELTS score. Regarding to semantic transparency, as I explained that before, the mean score for opaque items was lower than for the literal items. The model with semantically transparent and opaque items significantly predicted IELTS score. However, there is no interactions between literal items and opaque items. Discussion. This study tried to investigate the productive knowledge of multi-word units among Persian-speaking English learners and focusing on critical factors such as frequency, congruency, and semantic transparency. And the findings provide important insight into the role of these factors in L2 collocation knowledge and its relationship to proficiency, and try to provide implications for a teaching curriculum design and further research. Regarding to the research question 1, this study confirms previous research that showing that proficiency and collocation knowledge are closely linked. It means that learners with higher proficiency are more familiar with a broader range of collocations. However, there is limitations regarding these items. This study is rely on self-reported IELTS scores, which may introduce bias. So further studies could use official test score to ensure more accurate proficiency measure. Regarding the influence of the frequency, this study reinforced the importance of frequency in L2 learning and supporting usage-based approach that emphasized the role of repeated exposure and a practice. However, there is an unexpected findings. F2 did not significant predicted proficiency and suggesting that there is a non-linear relationship in collocation learnings. The role of L1 L2 concurrency in collocational knowledge was investigated in this research, and the result shows that the learners perform better on concurrent multi-word units than non-concurrent ones. And also in previous research in 2023 and Dr. James Rogers 2017 found that a high ratio of items in a large-scale multi-word unit list was in concurrence with the Japanese and Persian equivalents. Therefore, advanced L2 learners may form an acceptable L2 collocations because they rely too heavily on word-for-word translation from their L1. This type of studies emphasize that explicit teaching strategies such as contrastive analysis and activities targeting inconcurrent multi-word units can help learners overcome negative transfer from their L1 and develop more accurate collocational use in English. Finally, the study found that learners perform better on multi-word units with transparent meaning compared to those with opaque meanings, and also the regression analysis shows that knowledge of opaque multi-word units had more substantial predictive value for proficiency. However, our previous study found that the high ratio of items are literal, so just only focus on opaque items, especially for a beginner, is not recommended. This study also highlighted the interaction between frequency and concurrency in shaping learners' ability to acquire opaque items. For example, learners shows a success with opaque items such as peering in that classified as a more frequent items and somewhat inconcurrent in Persians compared to drift off that classified as a less frequent item and totally inconcurrent with Persians. This result suggested that focusing on frequency and concurrency in teachings could be recommended to compare only focus on transparency. Implications. Based on the result of current studies and our previous studies, which highlighted that concurrency should be a main criterion to select useful multi-word units, this study emphasized that a focus on frequent multi-word units while integrating contrastive analysis of L1 and L2 collocations. This type of studies also reduce the impact of L1 interference. Based on these findings, these studies develop a web-based general English phrases that also called general English phrases list, and you can find this list by searching on the links provided in these slides. Also, the list with 4,600 items developed on flashcard dialects as well. This slide shows the screenshot of General English Phrases List website, and it first mentions that all items in this website are in concurrence with Persians and sorted based on their frequency. Teaching strategy, several studies in this area recommended that intentional teachings and learnings in a collocation is very effective. For example, recently Sembol and her colleagues in 2004 found that the effectiveness of the deliberate learning in collocation retentions by using equal and expanding spacing schedule. This type of study supports that explicit activities such as a flashcard is very effective way for teaching and learning collocations, and also to reduce the type of errors such as L1 interference. Contrastive analysis is very useful techniques. The same as other research, this study has got several limitations. One of them is related to the sample size of the test. We selected only 32 items from a large scale list. However, some researchers noted that more than 13 items would negatively affect practicality of the test due to the length of the test. On the other hand, some researchers noted that selected 30 items from each frequency band, and we selected only 8 items per frequency band. Therefore, future research should consider more items from each frequency bands. Another one is related to the self-reported IELTS scores could be provided and bias. Thank you for your attention to this presentation.